I don't think anyone here thought about using Photoshop as a CLI, did they? Because this is not what I'm advocating for, okay? Don't do that, okay? I haven't tried, but I don't think it's a very nice experience. So GUIs are good for things like discoverability, for non-repetitive tasks, or for dealing with multimedia. But none of those are things that we used to do in our day-to-day as engineers. There's, of course, edge cases. There always are. But discoverability is also something we don't very frequently, right? When we approach a task, we usually know what we want to do. We have a goal in mind. We have a purpose. So we can just go there and want to accomplish the task in the most efficient way possible. We also don't do many repetitive tasks, but our tasks, they might not be repetitive in purpose, but they're repetitive in nature. Everyone needs to move files around, needs to transfer files from one machine to another, needs to transform text, needs to convert things. There's so many different kinds of tasks that they're repetitive in nature. You're not doing the exact same thing, but if you know how to use a CLI, those tasks just become faster. Also multimedia, okay, there's many edge cases to this one if you're a front-end developer or if you're dealing with graphics or videos or things like that. Well, maybe you have to use tools that have GUIs because that's the right abstraction and that's fine. You should use a GUI when you need a GUI. But when you're writing code, when you're dealing with the infrastructure and that kind of task, well, then probably a CLI would do the job better. So I'll stick to the opinion that GUIs are bloatware, but they're bloatware for what we do most of the time. And this is really a problem which has to do with the symbols we share and how we share them, right? We need to use the right abstractions in the right context. When we're talking to machines, it's usually easier to use structured text. It's easier to use a language which is closer to what the machine understands and to the way it communicates with you. When you use visual abstractions, many times they're not accurate. And that causes problems, that causes mismatches, that causes problems in communication, in language. So this is not really a technology problem. This is more of a communication problem. And communication is a very hard thing to get right. Not only in technology, in any problem domain. Marcel Duchamp once said that as soon as we start putting our thoughts into words and sentences, everything gets distorted. Language is just no good. I use it because I have to, but I don't put any trust in it. We never understand each other. Se eu estivesse falando português com vocês agora, provavelmente seria muito difícil de entender. And that's why I am speaking English, because if I was speaking Portuguese to you, as I just said, it would be very, very hard to understand. So we need to use the right language for the right problem. We need to use the right abstractions. So really, this is all about speaking the same language. It's all about having shared abstractions, having more precise vocabulary to describe what you're going to do, and therefore making things less magic. And this is a big problem I have with IDEs, because you have so many magic buttons that do so much, that when something goes wrong, the output you get, which is usually something that was just like taken out from a terminal, you don't know what to do because you're not used to that kind of language. You're not used to that kind of abstraction because you don't know what's happening behind the hood. When you use CLIs, you're aware of that, and therefore you know how to fix, you know what's happening. And I think IDEs, they're good. They're good when you either know CLIs already, or when you're starting out. But once you're ready, you can go a level deeper in the layers of abstraction so you can actually understand what's really going on. And now, let's go to the how. So this is like the holy trinity of the terminal. These are the tools I use. Might want to use different ones. Just don't use Emacs, okay? So I'll start with Zosh, right? Okay, so what is Zosh or Z shell? Well, Z shell is a shell. Oh, what a surprise, right? So what is a shell? Not this kind of shell, this kind of shell. So a shell is just a user interface for you to access your operating system services. So it's just a program, right? A shell is simply a program. Bash is a program, sh is a program, fish is an animal, but it's also a program. And all of those, well, it's important to differentiate them from the actual different parts that you have when you're dealing with a terminal. So when you're dealing with a terminal, you have many different pieces, and it's important to not get confused with them. First, you have the terminal, which is the actual physical thing that you go there, you type in commands, you get responses and stuff. You have the terminal emulator, which is just the emulator of the real thing. That's the name. And the shell, which can be Zosh, Bash, Fish, whatever. And by the way, the terminal emulator I use is iTerm. I really liked it. I've been using it for a while. It's very easy to configure, very easy to port configurations from one place to another. I've heard the Mac terminal, the native one, is quite good. But to be honest, I haven't tried it out, but by all means, have a go. And now just going one level deeper. So I would like to just give you a sense of how these things communicate, and also get an opportunity to talk a bit about streams. So when you use an emulator, what happens is that your keyboard, it provides some input to your emulator, which then passes it to something we call the TTY driver, which handles data to and from programs. And that is what communicates to your programs. And your programs can have streams attached to them so that they can get things through standard input and give back output to standard error or standard output. And it's really important to know how those things work so you can use them efficiently. And basically what happens is your input goes all the way from your keyboard to your emulator to your TTI to the programs and gets back to your monitor. And if you want to dig one level deeper in these abstractions, I've also written a blog post about this, which is very long, by the way. The comments are not as good as the last one. They're also fun to read. So I highly recommend that if you're more into streams, but I would probably need another 30 minutes if I was going to get into that. But OK, so why do you use Zosh? Well, you can just try out running this, /bin/sh, and you can feel the difference yourself. But I like Zosh because of its auto-completion features, because of its plugins. The plugins make my life so much easier. It's also so much easier to configure. It's very customizable. And also, it's so easy to navigate around. And if that didn't convince you, there's also a plugin called Chuck, which generates Chuck Norris phrases. You can pipe them into Calsay. Very fun. If you're in that 2000s vibe, of course. I don't think that was very fun. To manage my Zosh configuration, I use AllMyZosh. So AllMyZosh helps me get my configuration streamlined. It's just like a community-driven framework for managing your Zosh configuration. Just makes things a bit easier for you, especially if you're getting started, if you don't want to, do many things manually yourself and, go all the way down the abstraction pyramid. Finally, we have Tmux, which is a terminal multiplexer, which is a very nice name, isn't it? A very fancy name. All it does is split windows. So Tmux helps me organize my workflow and also separate what I'm doing and switch context very fast. So Tmux makes your terminal look like this. This is my setup with iTerm, Zosh, and Tmux. So that bottom bar, the beautiful bar down there, all the split panes, all that is all Tmux. And I like Tmux because, as I said, it just allows me to organize my workflow better. Because Tmux has the concept of a server which stores your sessions. So it means you do not always need to be attached to a session so that you can get things running. So when I'm at work, I'll usually have a session for work where I'll do work things. When I'm at home, I'll have just a home session, or if I'm writing a blog, I'll probably do a different session so I can manage all those tools, all that setup. If I'm in the middle of a task and I need to go out somewhere, I'll just detach and I'll just attach it later. If I have to switch context to do support or anything like that, it's very easy to get out of what you're doing and get back to it without losing the context of where you are, which tools you have open, where you stopped. That's why I like Tmux so much. So you have the server, which is always running in the background. You have sessions, which you can attach or detach to. And those sessions have panes or tabs, if you prefer. And those tabs contains windows. So those windows you can resize, you can make them bigger, you can zoom in, you can rearrange them. It's very useful for doing many things at a time. One of the things I really like doing is having some code running on the left and also split it and have a small pane running my test on the side. Also, like sometimes have a small one, open a small one for committing, for checking Git, and things like that. By the way, I don't use a text-based browser, if anyone's wondering. So these are some of the plugins that I use. I'm not going to go over all of them. But two that I think they're very useful are Tmux Continuum and Tmux Resurrect, which allows you to save and reload your sessions automatically, continuously, and persist them between shutdowns and restarts so that you don't lose your context. Most of the other things is just to make it fancier and more, and make it prettier so that you can impress your friends, because that's a very important thing, right? And finally, oh God, Vim. Yes, I like that attitude. So Vim is my text editor of choice. And some people say that Vim is hard, right? It's hard because it's different, but it's also better because it's different. Vim's learning curve is very, very steep. I would say sometimes it's just a straight line up. But once you get up there, man, the view is so nice. But I actually use NeoVim, not just Vim. And NeoVim is just a continuation and extension of Vim. I use NeoVim mostly because it has better support for asynchronous tasks. Because when I was using Vim, something that really, really bothered me was that when I was saving files and I was running syntax checks on them, or type checking and all that kind of stuff, Vim would freeze for a few minutes because those tasks were running synchronously in the same thread as Vim. And losing 5 seconds of my life, oh God, that was painful. Also, it has better scripting alternatives like Lua. And, well, has anyone here ever had to write something in Vim language, Viml? Oh, I feel for you, I'm so sorry. So sorry. So Lua is so much easier to write, and I was just more friendly. So I was also told, by the way, that Vim 8 has support for synchronous tasks, but now that I switched to NeoVim, I have to go back and try it out to see how it's going. And many people ask me, oh, why do you use Vim? Like, why does it matter? You know, is it really that cool? Yes, it's that cool. And, well, it matters because this is not just about writing code faster. Because most of the time, you're not writing code, are you? Most of the time, you're thinking. You're solving problems in your head, and you're putting them down. The problem is that many times, you have so much in your head, and it takes so long to put it down that it's very hard to keep that cognitive load running in your mind so you can remember everything and get things done. So Vim is not about writing code faster, it's about writing thoughts faster so that you don't have to keep that in your mind. It's about reducing drudgery, right? Repetitive tasks, things that just take time and don't add value. Right? Many times when you're editing code, you need to go up there, go down here, copy this line, put this there, switch between this and this. It's just annoying. Many of those tasks are just repetitive and annoying. And Vim provides you very nice ways of dealing with that. Very fast ways, very efficient ways. And things that make you just happier overall. And it's also about ergonomics. Right? Can you imagine having to move the mouse around all the time you need to edit a piece of text, put the cursor there, put the cursor here, select this, select that? I really don't like it. I think Vim is much more ergonomic. You have all your shortcuts at the reach of your fingers. Just so nice, so sweet. As you can see, I really like Vim, okay? I have a tattoo, right? That's how serious I'm about it. So now let me tell you how to become a pro. First thing, Vim Tutor. I cannot emphasize enough how great Vim Tutor is. So Vim Tutor is basically an interactive tutorial for you to so you just have a piece of text and it has instructions for you on how to edit things, how to move around. It's just basically a huge manual page which is editable. And basically just run around editing that manual page and doing things and following the instructions there. So Vim Tutor is great for getting started. Just download Vim. If you have 15, 20 spare minutes, that's enough a day. If you do it like for 5 minutes a day, probably in like 32 years you get there. I've been doing it since I was 2. That's why I managed to get around at 24. So, second thing, do things the Vim way. Right? Learn about the entry patterns, learn about how to detect, how to notice when you're doing things wrong. Right? And doing things the Vim way has a lot to do with going vanilla. Because when you do things the Vim way, when you learn them properly, when you learn how to use panes, when you learn the native shortcuts, when you learn how to set up options yourself, you don't need that many plugins. And hunting around for plugins is very annoying, and it also detaches you a bit from that Vim experience. I think that we should not aim to make Vim an IDE. Right? That's not our goal, right? We should aim to use Vim as it was meant to be used. So go vanilla. Try doing things. If they feel painful, then you go for a plugin. But start as vanilla as possible. Learn the fundamentals. And always ask yourself, is there a better way of doing this? This is extremely important, especially because in Vim, 99% of the time, there is. Oh, by the way, just another detail on doing things the Vim way. Here's a golden tip, okay? When you start using Vim, disable the arrow keys and disable support for the mouse. I know, sounds hard, but it's the very first thing I've done was to copy and paste those configurations into my vimrc file. And that made me so much better in it. Really, it's definitely worth doing, okay? And by the way, if you disable your arrow keys, disable them in edition mode too, okay? Arrow keys are not allowed. Forbidden arrow keys, okay? You can use them for other applications, right? Not for Vim. And finally, resist the urge to quit, which is not very hard, is it? I mean, no one knows how to do it anyway. I mean, I have another MacBook at home which runs Vim. That's why I brought this one for running Keynote, because I never actually end up quitting. Okay, I'll answer this question, right? I'll do it for you. You know, you seem really nice people. This is how you quit. Just in case you don't know. Sometimes, the thing is, sometimes this won't work. Isn't it amazing? Because you're gonna have written some things on your text file. And Vim is a very good friend. Vim won't let you lose your precious work. So what do you do when things don't work? Come on, what do? You scream at them. So this allows you to quit without saving. Amazing, but dangerous, okay? So if you're not sure, prepend a W to that, just to be sure. So some of the Vim plugins I use, these are the ones I consider to be essential. I really like Nerdtree because it gives me a very nice tree structure so that I can see how my files are placed. So I can manage folders and I can do all those things. I know people that don't like using Nerdtree, that just use native features to deal with files and moving them around and all that. And you can definitely do it. I just think it's more comfortable. Let's put it like that. There's FZF, which is kind of like Control P. I don't know if anyone here uses Control P. Okay, everyone's using FZF, right? Oh, okay, you. So I'll give you a tip. Switch to FZF. It's very nice. Okay, he uses it now. See? My predictions are 100% accurate when they're about the past. So FZF allows you to find files very quickly. So it's just a fuzzy finder, so you can fire up, find files without having to go through directories and all that kind of stuff. Because I do JavaScript development, I do a lot of markup. I also use mmat, which gives me very, very nice shortcuts for doing things very fast. So I can write markup, in no time. I use AO. This is not beer, okay? This stands for Asynchronous Linting Engine. And what it allows you to do is not having all those plugins for different languages that you use to lint things. So if you're using JavaScript, for example, you can configure it to run preacher when you save files, or ESLint, or whatever linter or code formatter you're using. So it's very, very useful, very fast. Then there's also NeoMake, which allows you to run tasks asynchronously. The whole thing I've said about saving and things being slow because of syntax checks, because of type checks, all that kind of thing. And then there's language-specific plugins, which you should definitely get one for the language you're writing. I know. If you're writing JavaScript, get a JavaScript plugin. If you're writing Rust, get a Rust plugin. If you're writing Go, get a Go plugin. If you're writing Java, I'm sorry. No, just kidding. Java's nice. There's also, next thing, general tips and references. So now I'm going to go very, very general. Very general. So a few extra tips for you. Be very mindful of your dot files. Organize them nicely. Share them. And always be looking forward to read others' dot files. So this allows you to discover new and better ways of doing things. Right? Like when you go to a conference and you talk to people, and you're like, oh, I didn't know you could do this in this way. Or I didn't know there was a better way to do this. So dot files allow you to do this. Also, I always try to do more using less. So try to use few programs to accomplish more tasks so that your workflow gets simpler. That's what we want, right? We don't want complex things. We want simple things. We want to accomplish more using less. Also, learn one trick at a time, right? Because you're not going to go out of here and become a Vim pro. I mean, maybe you will, but that'll probably take a few days, weeks, months. No one knows. Also, automate everything, right? This is, kind of everyone agrees with this, right? Automate everything. Everything that's automatable, just go on, automate it. And if you don't have the time to automate it or you think it's not worth, a very nice tip that I got these days was to do nothing scripts, which, as the name says, do nothing. All they do is provide you instructions which you can step through. So you just echo things and you wait for the user to press enter so that they won't forget the steps of those tasks. And because you have that, you can automate them gradually. So if you have a step that you know, oh, I can automate this very quickly, so you go on and automate that. And next time you run the do nothing script, well, it's going to have that part automated. You're going to run to the next. Oh, maybe I need to do this manually. So you go on, do it manually. And gradually, you can automate the things you need. And this is also very nice because it allows you to, because when you have a script that you can just see how many times it was run, you know, like, oh, I'm doing this thing too frequently. Perhaps it's time to automate it. So you can use data to prove that your choices were worth the time. And also learn the fundamentals. This is also really important. I cannot emphasize it enough. And it's very important not only for you to know the machine you're dealing with, to know how things work behind the hood, but also because whenever you're having to pair with someone, whenever you're in a different machine, you're pretty much good to go everywhere, right? It's the lowest common denominator, not rocks and sticks. So just a few other things, a few other tips that are on my tool belt. So streams, do learn how to use streams, you know, what I've said about how the TTY driver works, about how the emulator works, all that. If you have a very good knowledge of streams, you can combine programs very easily, you can know when things go wrong. It's just going to make your life easier. Also, when you're writing JavaScript libraries, because I write lots of libraries that deal with tests, I have to worry a lot about this because, you know, when you're running testing tools, you want to provide nice output to the user, you want to output errors to the right stream, you want users to have their output nicely formatted when they get it back. SED, which is, oh, SED is such a nice piece of software, man. I just love it so much. So SED basically allows you to, SED stands for stream editor, so you can just like, basically what I use it mostly for is just like running some regular expressions, transforming things on files. It's very flexible, has many features, it's very nice. And also it's very good to know regular expressions if you're using Vim, because when you need to replace something, many times you go for a macro. So a macro in Vim is just when you record a set of actions and you play them back and back and back and back again. And with SED, many times you can replace those with a simple, maybe not so simple, regular expression and get things done very quickly. There's also AG, which is a file finder. So you can use AG. I use AG mostly with FZF, so you can configure FZF to use AG behind the hood, so you can find files very fast. You have AWK, so you can get your output, pieces of your output nicely, I wouldn't say nicely formatted, but extract pieces of your output to pipe it into SED or combine it with other programs and get the meaningful information you want out of a piece of output. There's also curl, which is so useful. So curls allow you to do requests. So curl goes, by the way, very well with JQ, which is a tool that lets you manage JSON output. So one of the things I do is I combine curl a lot with JQ. So for example, when I do an HTTP request, when I'm testing an API or something, I can do a request with curl. I can get the output, pipe it into JQ, extract the pieces of JSON I need to get a result, to see if things have gone wrong or right. And then I just pipe it into a file. Very, very practical, very easy, very nice. Very fast as well. There's also make, which is very old school, but so simple to use. And there's also this legend that only one make file was ever written, and all of other make files are just copies of that, with a few tweaks. It's a bit complicated, but it's string complete, it's very nice. Cron, please, you know, just very, very basic. Vimium. Oh, Vimium is very nice as well. So Vimium allows me to use my browser with Vim shortcuts. So when I'm navigating the page, I just press F, and everything will light up. And I'll be able to use my keyboard to navigate, click on links, go back and forth, see my history. Very, very nice. No need for a mouse. You know, especially if it's an Apple mouse, those are very expensive. You can save a lot of money by using Vimium, okay? Also, it's a very good tool for noticing when websites are not accessible. Because when you press F on Vimium, it basically uses some accessibility features. It uses the markup to light up what you can click on or what you can interact with. So if a website is not very accessible, not many things will light up. And you can easily notice, right? So if you're developing a website and you use Vimium, it will not be accessible to you. So accessibility matters. And then man, which just gives you manual pages. That, I might say, is the most useful command in all that list, right? When in doubt, always just go and read the manual. You always find the answers there. I know it's very, very hard to get used to Unix manual pages, but once you've read a few, like 3002, things that the ideal number, you get used to them. And it's just very, very nice to be able to find your way around programs without having to go to Stack Overflow. Most of the times I do, but being able to read manual pages is a very, very useful skill. If you need some dot files, I highly recommend mine. This is not a biased opinion. So if you go there, you find many nice things. One of the things that I've done, by the way, is because macOS allows you to have dot files, allows you to have files which configure your Mac. You can do a bunch of native Mac configuration using dot files. So that's very, very nice if you're on a Mac machine. There's configurations for Vim, for Tmux, for a whole bunch of stuff. Highly, highly recommend. There's so many dot files around GitHub. If you just go into the search and type dot files and you go to the most starred ones, you can get some pretty nice ideas. But I try to keep my dot files as minimal as possible and try to go as vanilla as possible so that I feel comfortable anywhere. And I highly recommend you to do the same. So, a few of my blog posts, if you Google this, it's probably the first resort, the title, because, it's the title of my post. This one is also very interesting if you're interested in about learning more about streams. So learning about streams, by the way, is not only good for you to use CLIs, but it's also good for you to understand what your machine is doing. Highly, highly recommend. This is a huge, huge post, by the way, so take a few minutes, hours maybe, to read it. Then there's Stone Rider's blog. This is an amazing, amazing resource. So his blog is called Arabesque. It's about system tools and terminal science, as Tom calls it. Very good resource, especially for learning about Vim anti-patterns and that kind of stuff. He has a huge, huge article about Vim anti-patterns, in which he explains things like, oh, if you're pressing a key more than twice in Vim, you're doing something wrong. There's an easier way of doing this. Moving around, replacing things, all of that. Very, very useful resource. So that's it. I think I finished 5 minutes early, so we can have questions. Thank you. Thank you.
I think we will have time for one question. Someone? Burning with a question?
Anyone?
Oh, nice. There it is. There we go. Please stand up and ask your question.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for the talk.
Oh, thank you.
Provocative question maybe. Have you tried Emacs with Vim shortcuts? I think it's called Evil Mod or something.
You mean SpaceMax?
Yeah.
Oh, I've heard about it so many times. Actually, I haven't tried SpaceMax. No, I haven't. I think it's too late now. Like laser removals, they're very painful. No, I haven't tried it, but I heard very, very nice things about it. Very nice things.
I think we have time for one more question. There.
Good catch.
Hello.
Hello.
What is your opinion on Vim extensions on IDEs?
Sorry?
What's your opinion on extensions that turn out IDEs to Vim?
Oh, okay. My personal opinion, right? So I think those extensions they're useful, but I would advise against using them and just using them altogether. So I think like IDEs, they're very useful. There are many scenarios in which they're useful. Also, depending on the tool chain you're using, maybe they'll provide you lots of nice shortcuts and lots of things that will probably make your life easier. But I think that when you use Vim, so this is a problem I had personally, right? So when I got into college, we were mostly using Eclipse. Before that, refactor of the UI, which made things not so nice. So we were using that, and a very difficult thing for me to learn was how Java was actually working. So I knew how to write code, I knew how to make it run, but I had no idea what was going on behind the hood. So when I started using Vim and I went back to writing Java, I was like, oh, so I know how things work now. I know what's happening behind the hood. So that was very, very useful for me because I moved to the command line and I got down a layer of abstraction, so I knew more about the toolchain that I was using. But the reason why I think I would not use an IDE with Vim shortcuts is because my problem with IDEs is mostly that they do too much magic. So you have too many magical buttons, right? When something goes wrong, you have no idea where things went wrong. Mostly you get just an output of the terminal. Maybe you already know the language, so if you used a CLI before, and you know like, oh, okay, I've seen this error, I know what it's about, then it's easier for you to solve. But if you're not down that level of abstraction, if you're just like starting out, I think it's not very productive. It might be having too many abstractions to make your life easier, but actually it might be removing you from the knowledge of what's happening behind the hood.
All right, let's thanks Lucas and
thank you.